So I'm going to turn your attention to the focus of our next panel. And to do that, I'm going to ask you one more time to please take your cell phones out. We're going to take a quick poll. The focus of our next conversation is more specifically around data. And so you've heard a lot of the initiatives and the drivers that are pushing these departments to make changes. And I want to spend a little time focusing specifically on how data and metrics and measuring our progress will make the greatest difference. So if you could take your phones out and navigate to slido.com, you should see the next polling question there. These are some sources of data that could potentially impact diversity strategies in your organization. Please select all of the ones that you believe your organization is currently pursuing. Now, in the earlier poll, many of you mentioned that you're not, at the moment, having measurable results. So please consider the ones that you think that you're working on measuring. And as we collect the responses to this poll, I just wanted to provide a quick reminder that our website is biglawbusiness.com, and we are live blogging from this event today, so you can follow along and share that content with others when you get back to your offices as well. So now, it looks like a lot of people are tracking some data, but perhaps not the data that we pulled out. And I'm going to turn this panel now over to Stacy Hawkins, Professor of Law at Rutgers Law School, and she can pick up on some of the points that are on this question, as well as the things that the panel has been working on. With her are Ricardo Anzaldua. I apologize, I was going to mess that up no matter how much I tried. Senior Legal Advisor at Freddie Mac. Larry Chattoo, Associate General Counsel at Bank of America. Robert Gray, President of the Leadership Council on Legal Diversity. And Marianela Peralta, General Counsel and Corporate Secretary of Allegis Global Solutions. Thank you all.
Thank you, Sona. Well, I'm delighted to be here with all of you this morning and with our distinguished panelists. So let's just jump right into it. We're talking about diversity data and what kinds of data your organizations ask your outside law firms for and what you do with that data. So I thought we might start with kind of the opposite ends of the spectrum. I think that, Marianela, you're at a kind of organization that's at the front end of their diversity journey and perhaps is doing something new or different. And Larry, you're at an organization, Bank of America, that's been at this for a long time, and perhaps you have a different approach to diversity data. I'd like both of you to talk briefly about what you're doing, why you think that approach to diversity data collection is a helpful one, and what you're doing with the data after you collect it from your outside law firms.
Sure. Thank you. So I'll start by saying that I'm at a different point right now than even 2 years ago. So I've been at my company for about 2 years. But before that, I was with Walmart. So I've had the opportunity to actually experience the more sophisticated and more mature range of D&I programs. And now I'm at a privately held company in Maryland, where we're still, the process is a little bit less mature. You know, the way we've gone about it more recently is we've, as part of, as many of you know, a lot of in-house counsel departments, a lot of legal departments have actually undertaken processes to reduce the number of law firms that are part of their mix, right? And, you know, we have heard it called sort of the Pfizer model. But over time, a lot of our departments have grown. You know, the legal teams and the number of law firms really grew very large. And even as part of this whole process of understanding data and metrics, one of the outcomes is that many departments have actually reduced the number of outside counsel firms and are trying to sort of leverage their dollars better by, you know, looking at, focusing at some of those firms that are providing them the greatest amount of service. So similarly, that we've used the opportunity to this effort to reduce the number of firms to get issue an RFP. And as part of that RFP, what we've asked many of our outside counsel firms to essentially detail what they are doing in diversity. As I said, we're sort of at the beginning of this journey. Some of the things that we're asking, we've asked, do you have a D&I program? How are you measuring your statistics? Are you keeping statistics? We ask questions like, how many equity partners do you have who are diverse? What are the categories? What kinds of things you're doing in the community? So it's sort of a range, not necessarily all straight up about the people, but because of the different types of firms that we use, we're really just trying to gather as much information. And I can tell you we've recently started delving into some of the answers that we've gotten. And I don't know how many of you have been involved in these processes at the beginning, but it's pretty mushy right now. It's hard to understand what, if someone doesn't answer something, does that mean no? Does that mean, they just opted out? So we're sort of in the process right now of really sort of trying to really understand, like, what certain responses mean. We're coming up on the sort of the second version of this. So it was a 2-year cycle. And so I think now we have a little bit more with which we can have the conversations with the firms who responded.
Larry, tell us about your more mature approach to diversity and inclusion data.
Sure. So if you look around the room right now, you will notice some faces that are very tired. Those are the faces of diversity directors at law firms, okay? because they know the season is upon them, and it's not the holiday season; it's survey season, okay? And I see you're laughing, so you know exactly what I'm saying. So I would say one of the biggest questions we get from our law firm partners, is, what are you doing with this data? We send you this information. What are you doing with it? So I obviously can't speak for the rest of your clients, but I can tell you what we at Bank of America, what we do with the survey. So first, let me provide you a quick overview of our department. So we've got about 550 attorneys, and our Diversity and Inclusion Business Council is made up of a sort of cross-section of all the divisions that we support within the bank. And so we've got about 30-something attorneys and paralegals who serve on our committee. Our committee is further broken down into work streams. So we've got communication work stream, pipeline work stream, and so I serve along with my colleague Autumn Hunter on our law firm work stream. And I would describe our mission of the law firm work stream to leverage the spend that we have with our outside counsel to develop the careers of women and diverse attorneys at our law firms. And so every year we send out a survey, and it asks for detailed information. So we say, okay, look, we've spent X dollars with you. We want to know exactly where that money goes. How much of it went to white male partners, white female partners, LGBT, and we want the hard dollars, and we want the actual billable hours. And so once we get that information back, we actually have a team within the bank, within the department, that analyzes that. And so there are 3 things that we actually do with the data that we receive. So for the firms that are actually doing great work, we've actually created an award that we provide to those firms. And so we start with the 200-plus firms that we do business with. We narrow it down to about the top 25 firms. And then the committee then really dives into that data. And then from 25, we then narrow it down to about 6 firms. And then we basically interview the firms. Everyone has, a copy of the data, and we ask them really sort of hard questions. And then we hold an award every year, usually May or June. We invite all the firms in to the award, and then we provide the finalists with the award. And then the winner has an opportunity to go out to dinner with the GC and everyone on the DIBC committee, and really, because it's all about deepening the relationships with the firms. So that's what's happening for the people that are doing great with our the metrics that we've established. And I think I forgot to tell you that. So we've actually established sort of a metric with all the firms. We've said, we expect X% of our dollars to go toward the women and minorities within your firm. We're not going to tell you, we assume who are your talent that you want to develop. So the second bucket would be the firms that are basically just meeting our metric. And so when we meet with the firms annually, we will sort of review to make sure everything's going fine. They don't have any issues with continuing to meet the metric that we've established. And then finally, for the firms that are struggling, we will essentially, and I actually have to thank LCLD for this idea because so I was a 2015 fellow, and so for the firms that actually have a problem, we will bring together a team within the department. So we have the relationship manager for both sides. We will have we'll bring in let's see who else, LCLD fellows. And we will sit down and say, okay, look, here, where are the issues with this? Why isn't the spend going where we need it to go? And over a year, we will meet monthly to figure out, what's going on with the numbers and are we making any difference? So that's sort of what we do at Bank of America's legal department with your data.
Great. Those are two very different approaches from two different ends of the spectrum. I want to pose the same question but reframed to you, Robert and Ricardo, because I know that you have some fairly unique perspectives. You, Robert, from your perch at the top of LCLD, have kind of a bird's eye view of what's going on in the legal profession across organizations. And I'd like you to speak to what you see as the most common approaches and what might be the most effective from your perspective. And then Ricardo, I know that you've had a particularly successful approach to doing diversity data collection that you started at MetLife and that you've brought with you to Freddie Mac. And so I'd like you to share that and tell us how you developed that program and what have been the benefits that you've brought from it.
You'd like for me to start, or Robert?
Yes.
Sure. So I'm going to have just a little 30-second editorial before I start speaking. Speaking as someone who has been on each side of this data collection exercise, I was the chair of the diversity committee at Cleary Gottlieb before I left the firm and went in-house. And then, now I've been general counsel at MetLife, and I'm going to be general counsel at Freddie Mac. I really have to say that the true answer to the question that law firms ask in-house departments about what you do with all of this data that you collect from us is nothing. Most of the time, those data get collected up from all the firms and then they go and they sit in a file. And when we use them for something, it was to give the kind of award that Larry was talking about. But it didn't really get systematically used, systematically implemented into some kind of program that was designed to make a difference at the firms. It really, I think, honestly, from my perspective, is a huge amount of professional resources invested in an activity that produces very little result. So one thing that I would like to say in this little editorial is that I would like to encourage all the in-house departments to migrate to the ABA form of reporting on these data, because at least that way the firms will be able to respond with a single set of data that's all collected in the same way, and you're not trying to slice it and dice it 25 different ways, which is really what causes the exhaustion for the diversity teams. All the in-house departments asking the same questions with slightly different metrics. It's not really useful. And I do think that there are infirmities in the ABA form, and I think that we should all, as a profession, be working on correcting those gaps. The form doesn't, for example, ask any information that's longitudinal about the experience of associates in firms. How long have they been there? That question is missing. And I think that if we could all migrate to the same method of picking up the information and picking up all of the information that is really relevant to the questions that we're asking, then we can really use all this professional time toward a systemic approach to really improving the diversity of the profession, and especially the advancement of diverse professionals within the legal profession. So that's really sort of an intro to the program that I introduced at MetLife and what it was designed to do and where it comes from. So, I would say that I'll give you the headline first in true lawyer style. What we ended up doing was we created a sponsorship program in the institution that had as its focus the retention and promotion of diverse professionals into a leadership pipeline for the organization. It was a very self-conscious, self-aware method of bringing lawyers of color, women, LGBTQ, disabled into a leadership pipeline for the organization. So we were really thinking about creating paths to advancement in senior positions for diverse professionals in the organization. The subtext, the second headline, if you will, was, and we're going to do this through an approach of making our senior leadership accountable for the retention and promotion of diverse talent in the organization. So those two concepts live together in a little bit of tension, but really designed to try to launch us into a systemic plan for improving diversity in the profession. So where did this come from? It came from my awareness of diversity and inclusion as an issue, which goes back to when I was 17 years old in South Texas and doing community organizing and voting registration. And for my whole life, this has been sort of the theme that organizes my intellectual and professional activity. I was a student radical when I was an undergrad at Brown, and I was a student radical when I was at Harvard Law School. I joined the diversity committee when I joined my firm, established a diversity committee at the Hartford, then joined MetLife, and I didn't have to be the diversity committee anymore because I was the general counsel, so I could tell the diversity committee what to do.
Ricardo, can I just ask, is there any counterpart to this effort with respect to your outside law firms? Are they encouraged to replicate that?
I'll finish up the story for you. So it starts with, in around the year 2010, realizing that the legal profession by that time has been focused on diversity in the profession for over 30 years, 35 years, and assessing where we were at that time. Take a look at what the diversity statistics look like. Take a look at the number of African American and Hispanic partners in law firms. Take a look at the number of general counsels of color. And you can see that over the course of that 35 years, despite lots and lots of great programs, mentorship, adopt a school, get involved in training lawyers to take the LSAT, students to take the LSAT, the needle had moved very little. It moved mostly in the late 1990s and early 2000s to where we had about 20% women in big law advancing to partnership, and we got off of 0 for lawyers of color. And it became something that we really could just point to as a little bit of progress, but very little since then. From that time, we really kind of stagnated. So we introduced this sponsorship program at MetLife as a way of holding our senior leadership accountable for the advancement and promotion of diverse professionals. And the way that we thought about making it systemic was to illustrate the program to the market, to bring in our outside counsel and show them what we had put together by way of making our senior leadership accountable for the retention and promotion of diverse talent, and telling our outside counsel that they had a year to show us the program that they were going to put in place to hold their senior leadership accountable for the retention and promotion of diverse talent. If they didn't do it within a year, then we were going to work with them for 6 months to make that program something that we found credible and effective. And if they did not put a program in place within 6 months that held the old guys with white hair accountable for the retention and promotion of diverse talent in the organization, then we were going to cross them off the approved counsel list and go to firms that were committed to doing so.
So those are 3 different approaches, Robert. From your perspective at LCLD, what about that resonates with you as some of the most common, some of the things that you've seen that are most effective? What's your perspective on this?
Thank you, Stacy. Ricardo went from being a radical student to being a radical GC. At the end of the day, we are not going to make a substantial difference in the profession's results on diversity and inclusion unless we're willing to make differences in the processes that undergird the way in which law firms and law departments operate, which is where Ricardo was actually going. It wasn't a topical change, it was a systemic change. And until we do that, until we figure out what areas we can do the most work, we're really not going to make a lot of progress. I want to make a couple of observations and answer your question this way. David, in the first panel, answered the question of what he was looking for when he's looking for talent. And I thought about what he said, and I said to myself, well, heck, that's exactly the attitude that a leader ought to have about diversity and inclusion. Because if you have what he said, you will make progress. And what he said was passion and curiosity. If the leader of the organization is passionate about diversity and inclusion, you know it. It's not fake, and it's not something that is nice to say, right? And if you're naturally curious, then you want to know numbers. You want to be able to measure. What I like about LCLD is that we have a group of managing partners and general counsel who are passionate and curious at the same time. And we're causing ourselves to ask the questions about the systemic issues. Now, Ricardo raised the point about the ABA survey as sort of a universal document. BASF, which is one of our members, took the ABA survey and sent it out to all of its lawyers, all of its law firms, and then got back all that information and looked at it, like Ricardo said, and said, now what?
Right.
And they recognize everybody doesn't have the same analytical group of people to take it apart and put it back together to create the analysis that they need to have conversations with their outside counsel. So BASF heard of a group that we had been working with, and they're here today, called Lawyer Metrics. And Catherine and Evan, you should raise your hand. But they took the BASF stack of ABA surveys and then broke them down so that they could be viewed on graphs and charts and trend analysis that allowed them to say, your firm is third in the group of firms that are employing diversity lawyers. And until you can create some metrics that measure one against the other, or to create a trend analysis to say, you've been putting a minority lawyer on my matters every year, but that lawyer changes every year. And so what's up with that? Until you have those conversations, it's hard to talk about anything of a systemic nature.
So that raises an interesting point, because I've heard consistently across the board that we know we need to make progress. And we have lots of people who are committed to making progress, and we have now the ABA model survey. So there's some structure around allowing people to do this. But there's still a need to incentivize firms to really make the effort to make meaningful progress, even if you're collecting that data. And we've heard now two different approaches. Larry, you've talked about Bank of America's what we would call a carrot approach, the incentivizing approach. We give you an award if you're doing good. And Ricardo, you've talked about the stick approach, that we will cross you off the list if you don't make adequate progress. And there's a lot of debate, even when we can agree that we all should be trying to improve diversity within the profession, how we incentivize law firms to act towards that goal. What are your thoughts? And I know in particular, Marianela, you are early in this process, and so you might have given this some thought as you look to expand and evolve your program. Which of those do you think is a better method, and why?
So I would say that the incentivizing folks, I'm viewing it more as a partnership right now. Because again, we're still at this point where we're sort of trying to figure out, like, what do we have in front of us. But everybody understands that, you know, in short order, we are going to be making some cuts, right? But I guess the thing is, as we all have said, and everyone who's spoken before me, I mean, this process takes a really long time. And, you know, to the extent that some folks are willing to make changes, or in some cases with smaller firms, it's a little bit harder for them to flip the switch. You know, we're having these conversations. Like, so for example, you know, we had one law firm that was started. It was a family business, right? And they worked with one of my colleagues, and, you know, they had a conversation with the relationship partner, and the partner was like, well, you know, it's a family business. Like, we're white. Like, this is who we are. We can't change it. But let us tell you, like, what other things we're doing in the community. This is what, you know, this is how we're working with the law schools. This is how we're trying to recruit. My company, the Allegis Group, is in the talent acquisition and in the staffing and outsourcing space. So we understand statistics and metrics. So really starting to have a little bit more of those conversations about where are you recruiting, and, you know, what kinds of things are you doing for retention. In terms of, you know, incentives, again, we're not as sophisticated where we're ready to give anyone an award, but I think, you know, that's always, you know, a positive thing where you try to, you know, get people, I guess, credit for the efforts that they're taking. But I know for me personally, you know, where I will probably end up is that where we don't see measurable progress, we probably will start using those firms either less and less, and or eventually just, you know, make the cut. Because, you know, I've heard it said earlier today, I mean, this isn't a new topic. This has been going on for quite some time, particularly with the large firms. Large firms all have some measure of diversity and diversity programs. And, you know, at some point, you keep hearing sort of, you know, the same types of responses. And as a diverse person myself, and who knows folks in law firms, younger folks, people who are trying to make partner, we know that some of those challenges, at a certain point, they don't ring true. Because at the end of the day, what we're talking about relationships, and creating opportunities for relationships. But we're also talking about, you know, messing with, you know, as we would say, messing with people's money and finances. So, you know, trying to impact those, the structural pieces that impact the finances. As an outsider, I guess, at a smaller company, is harder than, you know, when you have a bigger company that, you know, the loss of that potential business is more than just impact on this partner, but could actually be a big loss for the firm.
Right. And that's a unique consideration for a small firm. So, Larry, talk about what kind of internal debates you guys might have had about adopting the award approach and whether you ever considered the stick approach.
Right. So I would say my thinking on the carrot versus the stick has evolved over the years. When I first joined our DIBC years ago, you know, I was like the character on The Walking Dead with the bat and the barbed wire. I was like, okay, we just need to get on here and like take out a firm and set an example. But as we've worked with the firms over the years, you know, we've realized that us versus them approach is just not the right way. And also sort of recognizing that, you know, we may be contributing to the problem as well, you know, because and I think it really hit home for me. We actually invited a number of partners from major law firms to a conference that we had earlier this year, and you know, a partner got up there and said, you know, we partner with you, and for example, you ask, you know, when you need a secondee, we send you, you know, some of our diverse talent, and then you turn around and steal them from us. And I thought, yeah, you know, we'll still get diverse talent. So I realized that we may also be contributing, and then we turn around the next year and ask why their metrics have fallen in terms of D&I spend. So rather than, again, the stick approach, you know, I think we've adopted really doubling our efforts with the partnership, and again, that's where you know, if we have a firm that's not meeting them, we will set up the example where I said earlier, where we will bring together the teams and really focus on the problem and partner rather than trying to punish.
So that leads. Oh, please.
May I object to being characterized as using the stick approach? You know, there are some models that are stick approaches. There's, you know, when Rick Palmore originally wrote the call to action, he said, you set some metrics that you expect the firms to meet, and if they don't meet those metrics, you knock them off the list. There's another approach that is, you know, you have to have some percentage of the timekeeper's time made up of diverse talent, or else we knock your fees down by 10%. That's a stick approach. The approach that we created at MetLife was not a stick approach. In fact, I think that we invested somewhere around 10,000 professional hours putting together our sponsorship program. We assembled all those materials, and then we gave them away to the market. Anybody who wants to look at the sponsorship program that we created at MetLife can get it from MCCA. So those materials are all there. There's training materials, there's communications materials, there's structural analysis. There's a lot of stuff there that's free for MCCA members, and please go use it if you would like to put together this kind of program. Plus, we didn't say to the firms, you have to produce X result. What we said to the firms was, you have to make a commitment to hold your senior leadership accountable for making this happen. I'm agnostic about the number of, you know, successes that they have. I just want to see a program that qualitatively functions, because it should work in the long term if there really is a commitment to diversity. And I think it's very important for all of us to have constructive relationships around this. So, you know, what we're doing is we're creating talent in the market. We're creating the capacity in the market for us to have senior leadership in the profession that's diverse. Some of that talent's going to circulate around, and those of us who run law departments, especially big law departments, know that that talent circulates. And I'm not going to be upset if one of my senior leaders goes off to become general counsel at another company. That's a success. I celebrate that success. And the law firms likewise should not be upset if we take away one of your great diverse talents to make them into a future leader in our organization. That's the goal. It troubles me a little bit when we on the inside get obsessed with how many hours are being used on our matters. That there is a problem there, because if that's the way we all analyze it, then we'll never achieve the goal until everybody's insisting on the same thing. So if we're thinking about a competition where we get to compete away some of the hours of the diverse talent in the law firms, we just may be competing the scarce time of the very few people that they've decided to stick there into the clients that are concerned about this. So I'm not particularly concerned with how many hours are used on my matters. I'm happy to help promote the careers of diverse lawyers in the firms if I can, but I want there to be diverse talent in development for use on all the firms' matters, because my goal is for the firms to elevate associates to partners and then elevate the junior partners to senior partners and make sure that they're successful.
And that kind of success is what we're all looking to achieve. So I want to give the last question to Robert. I think that we've all observed the lack of progress despite sustained effort, and you talked, Ricardo, about Roderick Palmore's call to action. It's been a long time that we've been at this. What do you see as the possible disruptive intervention this time? Again, from your perspective, working with organizations, both law departments and outside counsel, what's different this time?
I think there's a new generation of managing partners and general counsel that have a different level of energy, consciousness, intentionality. Kim Johnson, who's sitting back there as managing partner, Quarles and Brady, represents that energy. Listen, everybody can point fingers at each other. That's very easy. Where we're going to make change is on a collaborative execution of specific ideas and initiatives. And if we can say, whether it's sponsorship, whether it's quality assignment, whether it's succession planning, whether it is relationship partners, until you decide as a general counsel and you encourage as a managing partner a collaborative accountability model, we're not really going to get much further than we are. Or if we do get further, it'll be episodic and it'll be a one-off. I think that the profession is at a point where we can scale some of this. Best practices drives me crazy, the term does. I think you got to look at what's working at various organizations. You've got to adopt models that are not one size fits all, but can be modified to advance the talent in your organization. Nobody cares, and nobody says, you're taking too many white guys away from me to be in the general counsel's office. What they complain about are women and minority lawyers. Why? Because they're not that many in the profession itself. But the idea of creating, democratizing information for minority lawyers and creating a system where you can make application of that information for the advancement of their careers through accountable initiatives will make a huge difference and allow us to scale what it is we do sort of in a one-off position today.
So what I heard was accountability and collaboration. So if we're looking for good ideas to model success, that's what I would take away from this panel. Thank you all. I'll turn it back over to Sona.
Yeah, thank you. Very much appreciate your time. There are lots of questions, but we do also want to make sure we leave enough time for our workshop this afternoon. So I'm going to just ask the one that has come in, if you don't mind, and then I'm going to invite all of you to ask questions of each other here in a few minutes. But there was one question that I thought would be interesting, and you talked a lot about some of the incentives and efforts vis-a-vis the relationship with law firms. But would one of you be willing to comment about the data you're collecting and using it within your law department to hold your own team accountable for demanding diverse teams, for selecting firms with diversity in mind?
Sure, so I can take that. Well, so yes, we often do that with our look at each one of the, I think we've got about 6 deputy general counsels, and we look at the spend that the teams have, and we look for opportunities for if they're lacking to figure out where are the partnership opportunities for them to get that spend and increase the you know, the amount of spend that's going toward women and minorities at whatever firms that they're working at. So yeah, we do reflect both, you know, externally and internally as well.
Yep. Terrific.
Yeah, we haven't done it yet, but that is something that we do intend to do.
Great.
I think the other thing you got to do is take that information and make it the subject of conversation to say, now, what can I do to help you, law firm, advance your interest that will advance my interest? And at the end of the day, can we figure out a way to measure your progress that over time will tell me whether you're in this to win it or whether you're in this to make me happy?
Thank you all very much. I really appreciate all the time you've spent with us. And please join me in thanking the panel today.